The words rolled off his tongue like venom, and for a second I thought I'd misheard him. "You're a burden to me. I don't need you anymore." It was my own son-in-law, Tom, standing there in the living room with a smug grin, holding a folded eviction notice in one hand and a lottery check in the other. My daughter, Emily, stood beside me, her face pale and her hands trembling. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I wasn't even angry yet, just stunned. It was like someone had smacked me right across the face. I looked down at the check in his hand, my eyes catching the bold, impossible number. $10 million. I let my eyes travel back up to his face. That's when I saw it. Pure arrogance, the kind that only comes when someone who's never held real power suddenly has it dropped into their lap. Emily whispered, "Mom, please let's just go. He's not worth it." Tom smirked wider, stepping forward like a peacock flaunting its feathers. "You heard your daughter. Oh, I got money now. Real money. I don't need to house freeloaders anymore." My eyes narrowed, but my lips curled into the faintest smile. "Tom," I said slowly, almost tasting the irony that was about to unfold, "are you sure you read that ticket correctly?" His brow furrowed for the smallest second before he barked out a laugh. "Of course I did. Bought it. My numbers. My win. My money." I chuckled then. Not a polite laugh, but a deep, genuine laugh that caught even Emily off guard. It echoed in that living room, bouncing off the walls like it had no right to be there. And that's when I realized. He didn't know. He didn't know whose name was printed in neat, bold letters on that ticket. I suppose I should introduce myself before I go any further. My name is Margaret Lawson. I'm 84 years old, a retired librarian from a small town in Vermont. I've got silver hair that still holds onto a hint of my once golden blonde, a stubborn streak longer than the Appalachian Trail, and a habit of keeping quiet until the moment I decide to speak. I've seen the world change in ways that still boggle my mind. Cell phones, self-driving cars, people getting famous just for filming themselves eating dinner. But the one thing that hasn't changed, not one bit, is greed. And Tom. Tom was the perfect example. Emily married him 12 years ago against my advice. I didn't dislike him at first. He was charming in that overconfident, too slick way. But even back then I could see the little cracks. He bounced from job to job, always with an excuse. Always blaming a bad boss or the economy. Always promising he'd get on his feet. For the last 2 years, he hadn't worked at all. Lived entirely off Emily's paycheck and occasionally, my modest retirement savings when bills piled up. I never complained though. My daughter needed stability, and if helping them meant keeping a roof over their heads, so be it. But that was before the lottery ticket. 3 weeks ago it was just another dreary Tuesday. Rain tapping against the windows, the smell of fresh coffee in the kitchen. I'd walked to the corner store for my morning paper, my scarf pulled tight against the chill. On a whim I bought a lottery ticket. Not because I thought I'd win, heavens no, but because it reminded me of my late husband, George. He used to buy them every Friday, grinning like a kid as he scratched the numbers. When I got home I tossed the ticket on the counter and forgot about it. The next morning Tom spotted it. "You actually buy these things," he scoffed, picking it up. "Every now and then," I'd said, not looking up from my crossword. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Waste of money. But hey, if you win, I'll take half as your ticket consultant." I'd laughed, thinking nothing of it. Fast forward to last night. The news anchor read out the winning numbers, and Emily screamed from the living room. I shuffled in, my hands damp from washing dishes, and saw Tom staring at the ticket like it was the Holy Grail. "These are our numbers," Emily whispered. Tom's eyes were wide, his hands shaking as he held the ticket like it might vanish. Then he looked at me, and in that instant something shifted in his face. "He didn't say we won. He said I won." Now here we were this morning, him kicking us out as though we were nothing. "You're serious?" Emily's voice cracked. "Dead serious," Tom said, waving the check. "I'm done playing house with broke women. I'm rich now. You two can figure out your own lives." I tilted my head, letting the silence hang just long enough to make him squirm. Then I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm but sharp as glass. "You might want to take another look at that check, Tom," I said softly. He frowned, glancing down at it. I could almost see the exact second he noticed it. His eyes narrowing at the neat line of text under the amount. "Pay to the order of Margaret Lawson." His smirk faltered. My smile grew. And that's when the front door burst open. The front door slammed open so hard it rattled the framed pictures on the wall. For a second, I thought maybe Tom's smugness had summoned the police. Instead, a tall man in a brown uniform and muddy boots stepped inside like he owned the place. Sheriff's badge gleaming, hat tucked under his arm. His weathered face scanned the room, his eyes lingering on Tom, then on the check in his hand. "Morning, folks," Sheriff Collins said, his voice low and steady. "We've got ourselves a little situation." Tom straightened up instantly, puffing out his chest like a rooster. "If this is about the parking ticket, I'll pay it. I'm rich now." He held the check up like it was proof of his newfound status. Sheriff Collins didn't even blink. "That's not what I'm here for, son." His gaze shifted to me. "Mrs. Lawson, I believe this belongs to you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out my wallet. My missing wallet. I hadn't even realized it was gone until that moment, and the sight of it in his hand sent a shiver down my spine. "Found it in the glove compartment of your son-in-law's truck," the sheriff continued. Emily's head snapped toward Tom. "What?" Tom laughed nervously. That's not what it looks like." "It looks like theft," Sheriff Collins interrupted, his voice suddenly hard. "And considering there's a winning lottery ticket involved, I'd say we might be looking at something worse." I didn't say a word, just crossed my arms and watched the color drain from Tom's face. 3 nights earlier, I'd heard footsteps in the kitchen after midnight, light enough to make me question if I was dreaming. The next morning my purse had been in a different place, but nothing seemed missing. I figured maybe Emily had moved it. Now it was all clicking into place. Tom must have taken the ticket from my wallet, waited for the numbers to be announced, and then tried to claim it as his own. "Sheriff, this is ridiculous," Tom sputtered. "We're family. That ticket's as good as mine." Sheriff Collins tilted his head. "It's got Mrs. Lawson's name on it, and in this state, lottery winnings are non-transferable unless gifted after the prize is claimed. You didn't buy it. You didn't sign it. That makes it hers." Emily covered her mouth, eyes wide. Tom's mouth opened, then closed again like a fish gasping for air. I stepped forward, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut through steel. "Tom, did you think I wouldn't notice you suddenly rolling in cash? Or that I wouldn't hear about you making calls to a real estate agent last night?" His jaw clenched. "So what if I did? I deserve this. I've put up with." "With what?" Emily snapped, her voice trembling but fierce. "With living rent-free for 2 years while my mother paid for everything. With sitting on the couch while we worked to keep food on the table." He looked like he wanted to argue, but Sheriff Collins wasn't done. "Son," the sheriff said, stepping closer, "if you keep claiming that check, I'll have to get the state involved. Fraud charges. You really want that?" Tom's eyes darted between the sheriff, Emily, and me. For the first time, I saw something other than arrogance in his expression. Panic. Then, without warning, he lunged. It happened so fast Emily barely had time to gasp. Tom grabbed the check from my hand and bolted for the door. "Tom!" Emily screamed. Sheriff Collins reached for him, but he was already halfway across the yard, his sneakers pounding the gravel. I stood frozen for a heartbeat, my pulse hammering in my ears. And then I smiled again, because what Tom didn't know was that I had already deposited the winnings into a brand new account that morning. The check in his hand. Photocopy. But before I could open my mouth to explain, a loud crash erupted from outside. We all rushed to the door. Tom's truck was gone. And so was Tom. The sound of Tom's tires screeching away still rang in my ears as I stepped out onto the porch. The cold Vermont air stung my cheeks, but I hardly noticed. My eyes followed the dust trail his truck left behind until it disappeared around the bend. Emily stood beside me, shivering, not from the cold, but from a mix of fear and fury. "Mom, what is he going to do?" I kept my gaze steady on the empty road. Exactly what I expect him to do. Something stupid. Sheriff Collins adjusted his hat, his brows knitting together. "Mrs. Lawson, I think we need to get ahead of him. If he's got that fake check and believes it's real, he's gonna run straight into trouble, or drag you into it." I nodded slowly. "He's desperate. That makes him dangerous." We went back inside and I put on a fresh pot of coffee. The smell filled the kitchen, familiar and grounding, even as my mind raced. I had opened that new bank account the same morning the numbers were announced. Years of working in a library had taught me the value of documentation, so I made sure every step was airtight. Signed forms, notarized statements, even a safe deposit box for the original ticket until I could claim it. Tom had no idea. He thought the paper in his hand was his golden ticket. What he did have, however, was a big enough mouth to start making promises to people who'd love to get their hands on his winnings. Sure enough, my phone buzzed not 30 minutes later. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mrs. Lawson," a man's voice said, low and smooth. "I believe your son-in-law has something of mine." My grip on the phone tightened. Who is this? Let's just say he owes me. And if he doesn't pay up, I might start collecting from other members of the family. The line went dead before I could respond. I lowered the phone slowly, feeling Emily's eyes on me. "Who was it?" she asked. "Trouble," I said simply. Sheriff Collins, who had been leaning against the counter, straightened. "We might be looking at more than just a greedy fool here. If he's mixed up with people who think he owes them money, this could spiral." Emily sat down hard at the kitchen table, her hands in her hair. "I can't believe I married this man. I can't believe he's dragged us into this." I walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't drag us into anything, honey. He did. And now we're going to handle it." That evening I got my first confirmation of just how bad things had gotten. A neighbor, Mrs. Parker, stopped by with a casserole. "I saw Tom earlier," she said quietly, glancing around like someone might be listening. "He was down at Miller's Tavern, waving that lottery check around and buying drinks for everyone. Said he was gonna pay off some fellas and then disappear to Florida." I thanked her and shut the door, my mind whirring. If Tom thought Florida was his escape, then whoever had called me was going to make sure he never made it out of town. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I sat in my armchair, watching the snow begin to fall outside, my thoughts drifting back to George. "Always have a plan," he used to tell me. "And always have a plan for when the first plan fails." I had my plan. But now I realized I might need a second one. The next morning, the sound of an engine idling outside woke me before sunrise. I peeked through the curtains. A black SUV sat at the end of my driveway, its windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. Emily came downstairs in her robe. "Mom, whose car is that?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Answered. "You have 24 hours, the voice said. "Or your daughter pays the price." And then, in the faint background, I heard something that turned my blood cold. Emily's voice, crying. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My eyes darted to the real Emily standing right in front of me, her hands tightening on her robe. She looked just as terrified as I felt. The voice on the phone, it wasn't live. It was a recording. I tightened my grip on the phone, my voice like ice. "You're bluffing." A low chuckle came from the other end. "Doesn't matter if you believe me, Mrs. Lawson. 24 hours. $10 million. Or you'll find out how real I can be." The line went dead. I stood there in the kitchen, my pulse thundering in my ears. Emily's face was pale. "Mom, what did they say?" "They want the money," I said simply. "And they think I'm scared enough to hand it over." Sheriff Collins arrived 15 minutes later, still smelling faintly of wood smoke. After I explained the call, His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Sounds like somebody Tom owes money to, he said. Could be gambling debt, could be something worse. Either way, they think you're holding the cash. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. But you already deposited it. Can they even get to it? They can't touch the account, I said. But that doesn't mean they won't try to touch us. We spent the rest of the morning going over possibilities. Sheriff Collins suggested I stay at his sister's place out in the country for a few nights, but I refused. This is my home, I said firmly. I'm not running. Instead, I decided to use Tom's arrogance against him. I had a few friends at the bank who owed me favors, and I called one. Janice, the branch manager. Margaret, I heard about your big win, she said cheerfully. Congratulations. Thanks, Janice, I said. I need a little help. Can you make it look like the funds are still in check form? I want certain people to believe I haven't deposited them yet. She hesitated only a moment before agreeing. If these men and Tom thought the money was still sitting here, they'd come for it. And when they did, I'd be ready. By afternoon, the black SUV was gone, but the knot in my stomach stayed. I knew this wasn't over. And I was right. Just after sunset, Emily and I were sitting in the living room when the phone rang again. This time it was Tom. His voice was shaky. Margaret, I think I messed up. I leaned back in my chair, my tone flat. You think? They're after me, he whispered. 2 guys followed me from the tavern. I lost them for now, but look, I'll give you the check back. Just help me. I almost laughed at the irony. Tom, you've already given it to them. What? That check you took. The money's safe. But now you've got people who think you've got $10 million in your pocket, and they're not going to like finding out you don't. His breathing quickened. Margaret, they said they'd kill me. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, but I kept my voice calm. Where are you? The line cut off. Emily stared at me, her voice barely a whisper. Mom! I set the phone down slowly. They've got him. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Emily had gone to bed, staring at the bank folder holding my claim paperwork. Tom had betrayed us, humiliated us, tried to steal from us. But letting those men get to him, that wasn't justice. That was blood. And if I was going to save him, I'd have to walk straight into whatever trap they were setting. The next morning, a plain envelope was slid under my front door. No return address. No note. Just a single Polaroid picture of Tom, tied to a chair. And behind him, a man holding a gun. I stared at the Polaroid until my vision blurred. Tom's head was bowed, his lips split, and his cheek swollen. The man behind him wore a baseball cap pulled low, his mouth set in a tight line. Emily came into the kitchen still in her pajamas, clutching a mug of coffee. When she saw the photo, her hand trembled so badly she almost spilled it. Oh my God, she whispered. They're going to kill him. I set the photo down, keeping my voice steady. Not if I get to him first. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Mom, you can't go after these people. This isn't some petty thief. We're talking about men who probably have rap sheets longer than the Bible. I know exactly what I'm talking about, I said quietly. Because while Emily had been asleep, I had already started digging. I'd called an old acquaintance, Frank Delaney, a retired state detective who owed me a favor from when I helped his wife research a legal loophole that saved their farm. Frank still had friends in law enforcement, and in less official circles. Within an hour, he'd called back with a name. Guy in the picture is Kyle Mercer, Frank said. Runs an illegal sports betting ring in 3 counties. Dangerous but sloppy. If Mercer's after your son-in-law, it's because he thinks Tom can pay a debt, or deliver something worth $10 million. And if I told you Tom doesn't have it? Frank gave a humorless laugh. Then Mercer's not going to let him walk away breathing. Emily paced the living room like a caged animal. Mom, you can't deal with this. Let the sheriff. The sheriff can't act without a crime report, I cut in. And if we wait for the system to work, Tom will be dead. She stopped pacing. You're actually going to try to meet these men? He nodded. On my terms. I pulled out an old cedar box from my bedroom closet. Inside was a small revolver, a gift from George back in the days when winters were long and the nearest help was 30 miles away. I'd kept it cleaned and loaded all these years. Emily's eyes went wide. Mom, you still have that? George didn't give it to me to keep it as decoration. I also took the bank folder, the one that held my fake paperwork. If Mercer wanted proof I had the money, I'd give him proof. Just not the kind he could cash. That afternoon another call came in. Same low, smooth voice. You've seen the picture, the man said. Now here's the deal. You bring the ticket to the old paper mill on Route 9 tonight. Midnight. Loan. You try anything cute, the boy dies. Before I could answer, he added, Oh, and Mrs. Lawson. We'll know if you bring company. The line went dead. Emily grabbed my arm. You can't go alone. I met her eyes. I won't be alone. But they don't have to know that. Sheriff Collins was less than thrilled when I told him my plan, but in the end, he agreed to park a mile down the road with 2 deputies, ready to move in if things went bad. At 11:50 p.m., I pulled up to the paper mill. The place was a skeleton of its former self. Rusted metal, broken windows, the faint reek of mold and oil. My headlights cut across the cracked asphalt, landing on a single figure standing in the open bay door. Kyle Mercer. He waved me forward, and my heart pounded as I drove inside. Tom was there, tied to a chair just like in the photo. His head jerked up when he saw me. Margaret, don't. Mercer stepped forward, smiling coldly. Glad you could make it, ma'am. Now, let's see the ticket. I reached into my coat pocket, feeling the revolver's cool metal in the other. A loud bang echoed from somewhere outside. Mercer's smile vanished. And in the chaos that followed, I realized something terrifying. The gunfire hadn't come from the sheriff. The echo of gunfire rolled through the hollow shell of the mill, bouncing off rusted beams and shattered glass. Kyle Mercer froze mid-step, his eyes snapping toward the shadows beyond the bay door. One of his men swore under his breath and reached for a rifle leaning against the wall. Tom flinched in the chair, his wrists twisting against the rope. Margaret, get out, he hissed. My hand hovered over the revolver in my coat pocket, but I kept my face steady. I needed to know who was firing before I made a move. Mercer barked an order. Go check it out. 2 of his men sprinted toward the noise, disappearing into the darkness outside. I heard the crunch of gravel under their boots, then silence. Too much silence. A new sound crept in, a slow, deliberate clap. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, each carrying weapons, each dressed in dark jackets that made them blend into the night. The one in the middle, a tall, lean man with a scar running down his left cheek, was the one clapping. Well, well, Scarface said, his voice mocking. Kyle Mercer. Still picking on the small fish, I see. Mercer's jaw tightened. What do you want, Rafe? The scarred man, Rafe, grinned like a wolf. What's mine? And you've got it. Or rather. His eyes slid to me. She's got it. The pieces snapped together in my mind. These weren't friends. These were other sharks circling the same bait, me. Rafe tilted his head. Mrs. Lawson, is it? Your son-in-law here owes my crew quite a bit of money. Then he comes flashing a $10 million ticket. Naturally, we thought we'd come collect. Mercer stepped forward, his face twisted in anger. You're on my turf, Rafe. You walk in here thinking you can take what's mine. Rafe shrugged. I'm not thinking. I'm telling you. And just like that, guns were raised on both sides. I took a slow breath. This was no longer about a ticket. It was about 2 men who'd rather shoot each other than let the other walk away with the prize. I glanced at Tom. His eyes were wide, his lips moving soundlessly, pleading, begging me to do something. So I did. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the bank folder. You all want the money, I said, my voice steady despite the hammering in my chest. Then you're going to have to listen very carefully, Because I'm the only one who knows how to get it. Every gun in the room shifted toward me. Even Tom stared like I'd lost my mind. Mercer narrowed his eyes. "You've got 60 seconds, lady." Rafe smirked. "Make it good." I opened the folder slowly, deliberately letting the paper rustle. Inside was the fake claim form Janice had prepared. It looked official enough to fool most people, but it was worthless without the real ticket. "I'll hand this over," I said. "But only if you both agree to let Tom walk out of here alive." Mercer barked a laugh. "That's cute. You think we're gonna?" Before he could finish, the sharp wail of sirens cut through the night. Rafe's smirk vanished. "You brought the cops." I didn't answer. My eyes were locked on the far end of the mill where red and blue lights flickered against the broken windows. But as the sirens grew louder, something else happened. Gunfire erupted again. This time it wasn't aimed at each other. It was aimed at me. The first bullet whizzed past my ear, splintering a wooden post behind me. "Down!" Sheriff Collins' voice boomed from somewhere near the entrance. Chaos exploded. Mercer's men dove for cover, Rafe's crew scattered, and Tom's chair tipped over as he tried to roll himself out of the line of fire. I dropped behind an old stack of shipping crates, the smell of dust and oil filling my nostrils. More shots cracked through the mill, sharp and deafening. The air was thick with the metallic tang of gunpowder and the echo of shouts. "Cover the back exit," someone yelled. I risked a glance around the crates. Collins was moving in with 2 deputies, guns drawn, but Mercer and Rafe were using Tom as a human shield. They'd yanked him upright, ropes still binding his hands, and were edging toward the far side of the building. Tom's eyes locked on mine. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I saw something that looked almost like shame. I crawled low, keeping my revolver tucked close to my chest. My knees ached against the cold concrete, but I kept moving. I had one goal: get to Tom before one of these trigger-happy men decided he wasn't worth the trouble. A boot slammed down inches from my hand. I looked up to see Rafe towering over me, gun pointed straight at my head. "Going somewhere, Grandma," he sneered. I didn't flinch. "Only out the door. You coming with me, or do you plan on dying here tonight?" His smirk faltered just enough for me to act. I swung the revolver up and fired, not at him but at the overhead light. Glass rained down, the room plunged into shadow, and shouts erupted from every corner. In the confusion, I rolled away and crawled toward Tom. He was on his side now, trying to wriggle free as Mercer cursed and yanked him to his feet. "Move!" Mercer barked, dragging Tom toward the back. I stepped out from behind a support beam, gun steady. "Let him go." Mercer laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You really think you're walking out of here with both the money and him?" "I'm walking out with my daughter's husband alive," I said, my voice cold. "The money's already gone." His eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, gone?" Before I could answer, Colin's voice cut through the darkness. "Drop your weapon, Mercer." Mercer spun toward the sound. And that's when Tom made his move. He stomped down hard on Mercer's foot, twisted his shoulders and threw his weight sideways. Mercer stumbled, his grip loosening just enough for me to grab Tom's arm and pull him toward me. We made it 3 steps before another shot rang out. Tom jerked forward, a choked sound tearing from his throat. For a horrifying second I thought he'd been hit. Then I saw the dark stain spreading, not on him, but on my sleeve. The bullet had grazed me. Collins and his deputies surged forward, tackling Mercer to the ground. Rafe's crew scattered into the night, tires screeching as they sped away. Tom was shaking, his eyes wide as he stared at my arm. "Margaret, you're bleeding." I looked down, the sting finally catching up to me. "I'm fine," I said through clenched teeth. "But you're going to tell me everything, and you're going to start now." Minutes later, with Mercer in cuffs and an ambulance pulling into the lot, Collins leaned in close. "We've still got a problem," he said quietly. I frowned. "What now?" He held up a small black phone, its screen cracked. Mercer had this on him. Last text came in 10 minutes ago. From someone asking if the package was secured. Package? Yes. Colin's jaw tightened. They weren't talking about the ticket, Margaret. They were talking about you. The word package echoed in my head long after Colin said it. Not the ticket. Not Tom. Me. I looked down at the cracked phone in his hand. The last text was short, almost casual. Is the package secured? Who sent it? Yes. Collins shook his head. Numbers blocked. Could be anywhere. Tom, still sitting on the back bumper of the ambulance with a blanket around his shoulders, looked more tired than I'd ever seen him. Margaret, I think I know who it is. I turned to him slowly. And when exactly were you going to mention this? His eyes darted away. I didn't think they'd come after you. I stepped closer, ignoring the throb in my arm. Oh. It. He swallowed hard. A man named Vincent Graves. He runs bigger operations. Mercer owes him money. He stopped, ran a hand over his face. I told him about the lottery. I thought if he knew we had cash coming, he'd clear Mercer's debt and maybe give me a cut. Emily, who had been silent up to that moment, exploded. You put my mother in danger for a cut? Tom didn't answer. Collins exhaled sharply. Graves isn't local. But if he's already sending messages, he's got eyes here. We headed back to my house under police escort, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. Every headlight in the dark looked like it was following us. Every parked car felt like it was watching. By the time we got home, I already knew we weren't staying. Emily went inside to grab essentials. I pulled Collins aside. If they want me, we use me. As bait. He shook his head. Absolutely not. Graves is smart. He doesn't show up to scenes. He sends people who'll do the job without thinking twice. That's exactly why we make him think he's already one, I said. We feed him a location. We make it look like I'm coming alone with the real ticket. Collins studied me for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. If we do this, we do it my way. Hidden backup, eyes everywhere. By midnight the trap was set. We'd chosen an old fishing cabin by the lake. Isolated, one road in and out, perfect for a controlled takedown. Collins' deputies were hidden in the trees, radios whispering in the dark. I sat inside at the rickety table, a lamp casting long shadows on the walls. The ticket sat in front of me, my revolver tucked under my coat. At 12:47 a.m. I heard it. The slow crunch of footsteps on gravel. A shadow filled the doorway. But it wasn't Mercer. And it wasn't Rafe. It was a tall, silver-haired man in a tailored black coat. Sharp eyes that missed nothing, a faint smile that didn't reach them. Mrs. Lawson, he said smoothly. I'm Vincent Graves. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Before I could answer, the lamp flickered, then died. And in the sudden darkness, I realized. Collins' radios had gone silent. The darkness was suffocating, thick enough that I could hear my own heartbeat. Vincent Graves didn't move. He didn't need to. His presence filled the cabin like smoke, cold and deliberate. You've been a very difficult woman to reach, Mrs. Lawson, he said, his voice low and smooth. But I don't mind a little chase. Makes the prize more satisfying. My hand inched toward my coat pocket, fingers brushing the revolver. If the prize is the ticket, I said evenly, then you've wasted your time. It's not here. Oh, I know it's not, Graves replied, almost amused. But you are. And with you I get everything I want. The money. And a little lesson for anyone who thinks they can outplay me. A faint rustle from outside drew my attention, but Graves' sharp gaze snapped back toward the door before I could react. You brought backup, he said flatly. Predictable. I forced a faint smirk. Maybe. Or maybe they're not the ones you should be worried about. His brow creased just enough for me to know I'd hit a nerve. From the shadows behind him, another figure stepped inside. It was Tom. But something was wrong. His hands weren't tied, his face wasn't scared, if anything he looked resolved. And in his right hand was a gun. "Sorry, Margaret," he said quietly. "I can't let you walk out of here with him angry at me. This is the only way." It was like the air in the cabin froze solid. Graves smiled faintly, like a man watching the final piece of a chess game slide into place. "Good boy." Tom glanced at him, then at me. "Give him the ticket, Margaret. Let's just end this." I stared at him, my chest tight, not from fear, but from a deep, bitter disappointment that burned hotter than any rage. "You'd sell me out twice in 1 week." "Yes." Tom's voice cracked. "I don't have a choice." Outside, movement flickered in the corner of my eye. For a split second, I saw Colin's silhouette through the broken window, crouched low, gun drawn. He was in position, but with Tom between me and Graves, one wrong move could turn this into a bloodbath. Graves stepped forward, his tone soft but lethal. "Mrs. Lawson, I'm not a patient man. You're going to stand up, you're going to hand me that ticket, and you're going to smile while you do it. Or..." A metallic click sliced through his words. "Not from Collins. From me." I had the revolver in my hand now, raised and steady, my finger brushing the trigger. "Or what?" I said quietly. Graves' eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't shoot." "Try me," I said. The next moments unfolded in a blur. Tom's hand twitched, his gun shifting just slightly toward me. And that's when a deafening crash came from outside, glass exploding inward as 2 deputies burst through the side window. Everyone moved at once. Graves lunged for me. Tom shouted something I couldn't hear over the chaos, and Collins stormed in through the front door. And then a single shot rang out, stopping everything. When the ringing in my ears faded, I looked down. The revolver was still in my hand, but Tom was on the floor. For a moment, the world was nothing but ringing in my ears and the smell of gunpowder. Tom lay sprawled on the dusty cabin floor. His gun skittered away into the corner. His hands clutched his side, and dark crimson spread between his fingers. Emily's voice screamed in my head, even though she wasn't here. "Don't let him die." Collins barked orders as deputies swarmed in, pinning Vincent Graves to the wall. Graves didn't fight. He just smiled, that infuriating, knowing smile, as if the game wasn't over yet. I dropped to my knees beside Tom. "Don't move," I told him. He let out a weak laugh that broke into a cough. "Like I could." "Why, Tom?" asked. My voice shook, not from fear, but from the weight of years of betrayal, all condensed into this one moment. "Why sell me out again?" His breathing was ragged. "Because I thought it'd save me. I thought Graves would forget the rest if I gave him you." "You fool," I said, my eyes burning. "He never would have let either of us walk away." Collins knelt beside me. "Paramedics are 2 minutes out. Keep pressure on it." He glanced at Tom, then at me. "You hit him." I shook my head. "I didn't pull the trigger." Collins frowned. "Then who?" From the corner of the room, one of the deputies cleared his throat. "Ma'am, it was him." He jerked his chin toward Graves, who was now cuffed but looking utterly unbothered. I turned to him, disbelief giving way to cold anger. "You shot him." "Why?" Graves' eyes glittered. "Because dead weight is expensive. Your son-in-law was a liability. I prefer a clean slate." "You call that clean?" He just smiled wider. "Cleaner than letting him talk." Tom groaned, and for the first time in a long time, I saw him for what he was. Not the swaggering lazy man who'd married my daughter, but a scared, foolish boy in over his head. And I realized something else. If he survived, he'd have to live with what he'd done. That might be worse than dying. The paramedics arrived and began working on him, cutting through his shirt, assessing the wound. Collins leaned close to me. "We've got enough to put Graves away for a long time. Kidnapping, attempted extortion, maybe even conspiracy to commit murder. But he's not the type to stay quiet in prison." "I don't care where he rots," I said. "As long as it's far away from me and my daughter." As the medics loaded Tom onto a stretcher, he reached for my hand. His grip was weak but insistent. "I'm sorry, Margaret," he whispered. "I didn't say it's all right. It wasn't." But I nodded once because forgiveness, real or not, wasn't for him. It was for Emily, so she could start fresh without the shadow of this mess. They wheeled him out, and the cabin seemed to exhale. The chaos, the shouting, the danger. It all ebbed, leaving behind the creak of the floorboards and the low hum of adrenaline still thrumming in my veins. Graves was the last to be escorted out. As he passed me, he leaned in just enough that only I could hear him. "This isn't the end, Mrs. Lawson. You don't win against me. You just get a head start." I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "That's all I need." The ride back into town was quiet. Collins drove, his hand steady on the wheel despite the night's insanity. I stared out at the dark trees rushing past, their bare branches like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. "You could have been killed," he said finally. "I know. And you walked in there anyway." I glanced at him. Sometimes you have to go into the fire if you want to pull someone out, even if that someone isn't worth saving. He shook his head with a faint smile. "You're something else, Margaret Lawson." By morning, the news had spread across town like wildfire. "Local woman escapes kidnapping attempt. Crime boss in custody," blared across the front page of the Burlington Gazette. Emily came by the hospital where Tom was recovering. I'd been sitting with her in the visitors' lounge, sipping bad coffee from a paper cup. "They're keeping him for at least a week," she said. "Punctured lung. But they think he'll make it." He nodded. "Good." She looked at me carefully. "Do you want to see him?" Thought about it. Really thought about it. "No," I said finally. "I've already seen enough." The lottery winnings cleared in my account 2 days later. Janice at the bank called to confirm personally. "You're officially $10 million richer, Margaret," she said. "What's the first thing you're going to do?" "Live," I said simply. "Really live." And I meant it. Not in the extravagant buy-a-yacht way, but in the wake-up in the morning with peace way. The kind that can't be bought. A week later I sold the house. Emily and I moved into a quiet cottage on the edge of town with a view of the lake. I bought her a new car, paid off her debts, and set up a trust so she'd never have to depend on anyone like Tom again. As for the rest of the money, I had plans. Some for travel, some for charities George and I had always supported, and some to tuck away for the rainy days that life always seems to bring. One crisp Saturday morning, Emily and I stood on the porch watching the sun rise over the water. "You know," she said softly, "I still don't understand how you stayed so calm through all of it." I smiled faintly. "When you've lived 84 years, you learn something important. Panic never pays the bills, and fear never wins the game. You keep your head, you keep your wits, and you keep your word. That's how you come out the other side." She squeezed my hand. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, honey." And just when I thought the chapter was closed, a plain envelope appeared in our mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts. On the back, in neat, deliberate handwriting, it read, "Your head start is over." The Queen of Hearts card sat on the kitchen table between Emily and me, its glossy surface catching the morning light. The handwriting on the back, "Your head start is over," felt like it was carved into my mind. Emily stared at it like it might suddenly sprout teeth. "Mom, what does this mean?" "It means Graves isn't done," I said quietly. Her voice rose in panic. "But he's in jail. We saw them take him away." I looked at her, my heart heavy. "Men like Vincent Graves don't stay behind bars forever, Emily. And even when they do, they have ways of reaching people." She rubbed her temples, pacing the kitchen. "What are we supposed to do? Move again? Disappear?" I sipped my coffee, letting the bitter heat ground me. "Running didn't work last time. We're not running now." For the next hour we sat in silence, each lost in thought. Finally Emily broke it. "Do you think Tom—" She stopped, chewing her lip. "What about Tom? Do you think he had anything to do with this?" I sighed. If Tom could orchestrate something like this from a hospital bed, I'd be impressed. No, this is Graves. And it's not about the money anymore. This is about pride. About sending a message. Emily crossed her arms. So what's the message? I picked up the card, flipping it over in my hand. That the game's still on. And he's letting me know I'm the prize. By noon, I was sitting in Sheriff Collins' office. The walls were lined with faded photographs of fishing tournaments and local fairs, but his desk was a fortress of paperwork. He leaned back in his chair, frowning at the card. You sure you don't want us to relocate you and Emily under witness protection? No, I said. You know as well as I do that Graves could find us if he really wanted to. I'm not living out of a suitcase in some motel halfway across the country waiting for the other shoe to drop. Collins drummed his fingers on the desk. Then we go on the offensive. But we do it smart. He wants you to know he's watching, so let's give him something to watch. I raised an eyebrow. A trap. A stage, he corrected. One he won't be able to resist walking onto. The plan was simple enough on paper. Make it look like I was going about life as usual, while Collins' people shadowed me, tracking any unusual movements, any new faces in town. If Graves was still pulling strings, he'd send someone. For the next 2 weeks, I lived under a magnifying glass. Every errand, every trip to the grocery store, every visit to the post office was timed, monitored, recorded. I smiled at neighbors, baked pies for church socials, and pretended not to notice the silver sedan that kept appearing in my rearview mirror. But pretending doesn't mean ignoring. One rainy Thursday, I left the bakery with a loaf of sourdough under my arm. The silver sedan was parked across the street, engine running. I walked past without looking directly at it, but in the reflection of the shop window, I caught a glimpse of the driver. Clean-shaven, wearing a dark baseball cap. And he wasn't looking at me. He was on the phone, speaking into it with quick, clipped sentences. Kept walking, my pulse steady. Collins' unmarked cruiser was 2 cars behind the sedan. When I reached my car, I pretended to fumble with my keys, giving Collins time to signal one of his deputies. The sedan pulled away before they could get close. That night, Collins called. He's not local, he said. Plates are from New York. Registered to a shell company Graves has used before. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the Queen of Hearts card still sitting on the table. So it begins. Margaret, listen, Collins said, his tone sharper now. If this escalates, I need you ready to move fast. No heroics. I gave a humorless laugh. That's not really my style. But Graves wasn't moving fast. He was moving patiently. Which meant the real blow, when it came, would be something I didn't see coming. Came on a Sunday. Emily had gone into town for groceries. I was in the garden, trimming the last of the autumn roses, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I turned to see a delivery van pull into the driveway. No company logo. 2 men in plain jackets. One stepped out holding a clipboard. Package for Mrs. Lawson, he called. I didn't move. From who? He smiled faintly. A friend. The second man got out, and that's when I saw it. The bulge under his jacket that no flower delivery man should be carrying. I stepped back toward the porch, my hand slipping into my apron pocket where my phone was. I pressed the speed dial for Collins and kept my voice light. I think you've got the wrong house. Clipboard man's smile didn't falter. Oh, we've got the right one. Before I could reply, the second man moved fast. Too fast. I turned to run into the house, but a hand clamped around my arm, yanking me back. The roses I'd been trimming tumbled to the ground. The van door slid open. And inside, sitting in the shadows, was a man I recognized instantly despite the bruises from his arrest. Vincent Graves. Hello again, Mrs. Lawson, he said softly. Thought we'd skip the middlemen this time. The moment I saw Vincent Graves in that van, the world around me shrank to a pinpoint. The air smelled of gasoline and damp upholstery, and his cold, sharp eyes cut through the shadow like a blade. Get in, he said. Not a request. The man with the clipboard still had his hand on my arm. His grip was strong, but I'd been through childbirth, widowhood, and years of dealing with Tom's ego. I knew how to fight pain and fear without letting it show. I didn't move. "You've got nerve showing up here in person, Graves. I thought men like you hid behind hired thugs." His lips twitched into the faintest smile. "Some situations require a personal touch. Or maybe," I said, "you're just desperate." His eyes narrowed, but he kept his voice even. "Get in the van, Mrs. Lawson. Or I let my men do it for you, and I promise they're not as gentle." The second man stepped closer, his jacket shifting enough for me to see the gun holstered underneath. My heart thudded hard, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. Panic is a luxury you can't afford in moments like this. Clipboard man squeezed my arm. "Inside. Now." I glanced toward the road, knowing Collins had a patrol car somewhere within a mile. But a mile might as well have been 100 if I didn't find a way to stall. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "But I want Emily to know I'm leaving. She'll worry if she comes home and finds the house empty." Graves tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle piece that didn't fit where he wanted. "You'll see her again. Maybe. Now move." They pushed me into the van. The metal floor was cold under my feet, the smell of oil and dust thick in the air. Graves sat in a swivel chair bolted to the floor, a throne in a kingdom of shadows. The door slammed shut, and the van lurched forward. I kept my back straight, my eyes on him. "What's your plan, Graves? You think you can just take me, walk away with the money, and vanish? That's not how it works." He chuckled, low and amused. "You've got a lot of confidence for someone in the back of my van. But you're right, it's not about walking away. It's about making sure you don't walk away." The men flanking me said nothing, their faces blank, professional. I kept my hands still on my lap, but my fingers brushed against something small in my apron pocket, the gardening shears I'd been using. Small weapon. Concealable. I filed that away for later. "You know what your problem is, Mrs. Lawson," Graves said, leaning forward. "You think you're untouchable. You think because you're old people will underestimate you. And they do, until you stick your nose into places it doesn't belong." I smiled faintly. "That's funny. I was about to say the same thing about you." His smile dropped. "You embarrassed me. You cost me money. You made me look weak. And in my world, that's a death sentence." "Then it's a good thing," I said, "that I'm not in your world." The van slowed, then turned sharply onto what felt like a gravel road. Through the tiny slit in the back door, I saw nothing but trees and the faint outline of an old structure. Looked like an abandoned hunting lodge. Perfect. Isolated. The kind of place you could scream and no one would hear. They dragged me out of the van and into the lodge. The inside smelled of mildew and rotting wood. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly. They sat me in a chair in the center of the room, rope biting into my wrists. Graves sat across from me at a rickety table. "Here's how this goes," he said. "You tell me where the real ticket is, and I make this quick." "You don't tell me." He glanced toward one of his men, who pulled a knife from his belt and began spinning it slowly between his fingers. "Then we take our time." I leaned back, keeping my face calm. "You're assuming I'm afraid of dying, Graves. I'm 84 years old. You think you can threaten me with something I've been making peace with for decades?" His smile returned, colder this time. "Then I'll threaten something you do care about." My chest tightened. "Emily." He didn't deny it. "I know where she shops. I know the road she takes home. I know she's alone right now, wondering why you haven't called." Rage flared in my chest, hot and bright. But rage makes you sloppy, so I swallowed it down and forced myself to think. "Emily's got nothing to do with this," I said. "She has everything to do with this," Graves replied. "Because if you care about her, you'll give me what I want. And I want the money." I took a slow breath. "Fine. You win. I'll take you to it." Graves tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Just like that." "Just like that," I said. But it's not here. It's in a safe deposit box in Burlington. And you'll need me to open it. The truth. The box did exist. But what was inside wasn't the ticket. It was a decoy, much like the one I'd used before. I just needed time to get Collins into position. Graves signaled to his men. "We're going for a drive." As they untied me and led me back to the van, my fingers slid into my apron pocket again. The shears were still there. I palmed them, hiding them against my wrist. The van doors slammed shut, and we rolled back down the gravel road. My mind worked fast, counting turns, noting the sound of a passing train somewhere in the distance. Every landmark was a breadcrumb for later. Halfway to town I made my move. Clipboard man sat to my left, close enough that I could smell the cheap cologne on his jacket. I waited until the van slowed at a bend, then dropped the shears to the floor, letting them clink against the metal. When he glanced down, I stomped hard on his foot and jabbed the shears upward into the soft flesh of his thigh. He screamed, the sound echoing in the metal shell of the van. The driver swerved, cursing. The second man lunged for me, but in the chaos, I rolled toward the back doors and slammed my shoulder into them. They didn't open. Graves' voice was like ice. "Enough." The second man grabbed me, pinning my arms. Graves took the shears from my hand and tossed them into the front. "You've got fight, I'll give you that," he said. "But you're not walking away this time." We pulled into the parking garage of a midtown office building, a place far too public for Graves' usual style. That worried me more than any backwoods hideout. As they led me through the service entrance, I realized why. Collins stood there, alone, hands cuffed behind his back. Blood ran down the side of his face. Graves grinned. "I told you, Mrs. Lawson. I know all your moves before you make them. Now it's my turn." And as he stepped aside, 2 more men dragged Emily out from behind a pillar. Her mouth was taped, her eyes wide with terror.